Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and today I'm here with Katrina Purcell. Hi, Katrina.
Hi, Angela. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. So, Katrina Purcell is an accomplished operations professional who launched her own firm last year, focused on enabling small businesses and nonprofits with the tools needed to efficiently scale and grow. Perfect. Absolutely perfect topic for this audience. So tell me, Katrina, what made you want to, number one, start your own business, and number two, go into this sector?
So starting my own business was a journey that I was not expecting.
Okay.
It was not something I set out when I was little to say, oh, I'm going to run my own company ever. Because I always felt like my skill set was in the execution, not in the big ideas.
Yep.
And I will say I was feeling sort of disillusioned with, the corporate world and even the startup world, and feeling like I was using my talents to sort of make other people successful. And they weren't always people that I admired or that I wanted to be successful. So last year I just thought, you know what if I took my talents and I put them to use for underrepresented founders, people who didn't have access to some of the source of capital or some of the educational insights, or, things where you could actually start to make little ripples and kind of change how funding is working, change the businesses that are successful, and help people who you truly felt passionate about live their dreams. And, I think in my career, I've been what I would call a jack of all trades, although a executive coach reframed that for me to be a queen of the chessboard.
Oh,
so
I love
instead
it.
of a jack of all trades where you might not be a master of anything, the queen of the chessboard is very strategic, right? And she can make moves backwards and forwards. And so really kind of framing it in that I can kind of do anything. But what I love to do is manage chaos. I love to take, things that don't make sense and make them make sense and help to make visions become realities.
Very cool. I love that. So I'm in the staffing and security industry, so I feel like I manage chaos on a regular basis. So I understand
most
that.
People, when I say that, they're always like, "Oh yeah, everything is chaotic." It's like, yes, I mean, most lives are.
Yeah. And honestly, like as women, I think that's what we also do very well is we manage chaos, because between, community, family, everything else, we're managing chaos all the time. So
exactly. I'm an oldest daughter, so I definitely feel that.
Yes, absolutely. So you started your own business. So tell me what challenges you had to overcome to start a business.
I think I was my biggest challenge.
Really?
So I'll start there. Yeah.
Okay.
So my husband thought I should do it long before I did. In fact, he was the one who kind of said, you just need to do it. Do it now. I was a little miserable in my job, and he's, I think when you're miserable in your job, we don't realize how much of that we bring home. We try to do our best, to come home and be, happy, healthy partners. But when you're not feeling, fulfilled, and you don't feel like you're spending your day, right? Because let's face it, we spend the majority of our time at work. When you don't feel inspired, you bring that home. And so I was nervous about it. And he said to me, one thing that stuck out, which is sort of, well, if it doesn't work out, just go find a new job. And I thought, I guess it's not a one-way door. I guess it is a two-way door. I could always go back to, doing something. And so him helping me to reframe that was very helpful. I think the other piece that I just talked with someone today who's thinking about quitting her 9-to-5, and it's being open to how things might evolve. So I didn't originally plan on helping nonprofits.
Oh, interesting.
It came about because someone contacted me and said, I think your services would be really worthwhile for my nonprofit. We're trying to scale. We're trying to grow. We have a lot of similar problems to a tech startup, but we're not a tech startup. What do you think? And so being open and listening and realizing the challenges were really exciting. And they're now the client I have the most fun with.
Oh, that's so awesome. It's very cool. Yeah, nonprofits are, it's a beast. I worked on the nonprofit side, on the event side as an event manager, as a director of events for a little while. And I tell you, it's complex because you have fundraising, you have budgeting,
Mhm.
you have various different events and fundraisers that all kind of are together but separate. You have boards, you have, volunteers. There's a
Yep.
lot of moving parts. So
And
I
then you
think
need to
that's
keep
brilliant.
making an impact while
Yes.
you're managing all of that, right?
Yeah,
And that funding is so directly tied to whether or not you can make a positive impact.
absolutely. And that can be challenging because sometimes you feel like you're just not doing enough. Sometimes it feels like a drop in the ocean and you're working so hard and fundraising is difficult. But
Mhm.
but yeah, kudos to you for helping out on the nonprofit side. That's amazing. Okay. So what do you think small businesses struggle with most?
I think a lot of times they struggle with how to actually operationalize things that they're doing. And so
Mm,
oftentimes when you're in the very early stages, and I did this in my own business, you tend to just get things done,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So you don't actually document how you're doing it because you
Right.
think to yourself, well, it's just me, so who cares?
Yep.
And then when you try to scale, you say, well, wait a minute, I have to teach someone how to do that. But I don't know how to do it. I just do it. Right. And so oftentimes I think that the main thing is you plan and you only document for where you are currently without thinking of where you want to go. And so then when
Hmm.
you get where you're going, you say to yourself, I have no map of how I got here. I don't
Hmm.
know how to train someone. I don't know how to go from being a generalist to a specialist. I don't know how to hire the right specialist because I have no idea what they would be working on because I can't hand anything off. And so
Hmm.
I think we play too small in our own minds, right? We don't think about that big future of what if I scale this? What if it's not a lifestyle business? What if it becomes this larger than life thing? And so we don't necessarily have the organizational mind to think of, okay, what would my first hire be and why? And what
Hmm.
processes would I need documented? Even when you're bringing on, I've brought on a virtual assistant. Even when you're bringing on someone like that, what am I going to give them?
Right.
How am I going to give it to them? What does that look like?
And I think that's one of the things that we struggle with as small business owners, because I know that was one of my struggles. I knew I needed help. I knew I was working too many hours, but I didn't know how somebody could help me because I just assumed everything that was being done had to be done by me. And then
Yes.
when I did finally say, okay, there's just too many hours in the day and I can't keep up, I hired somebody, but I had a really hard time delegating because it was one of those like, well, then I have to teach them how to do it. And then I don't have the time to teach somebody to do
Right.
this. It's easier for me to just do it. And so I'm just going to do it. And so, that person will be over there twiddling their thumbs. And here I
Exactly.
am working until 11 o'clock at night trying to get it done. And yeah, that it's a constant struggle. So that's absolutely correct response to say, we have a hard time operationalizing
And
things.
I
That's
and I
brilliant.
think the funny part is like even I do, right? My
Yeah.
virtual assistant last week, she goes, am I being helpful? Is there stuff you should be giving me? Like, well,
Right.
probably yes, there is stuff I
Yeah.
should be handing off to you,
I
but I'm a
know.
control freak and I still need to,
Yep.
have that. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to just wrap your head around what can be delegated.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing. It's like, I'm reading through this stuff and I'm like, okay, I got to figure this out. I got to figure this out. I got to figure this out. When it would just be so easy to say, hey, who can take this on? And if you
Yeah.
just ask the question, more than likely somebody's going to raise their hand and be like, I think I can figure that out. I mean, if I'm going to go to Google and YouTube and all the other
Exactly.
things, why wouldn't they? So so why can't they figure it out just as easy as I can figure it out? So
Exactly.
yeah, I struggle with that too. I am guilty as charged for sure. So when you're helping businesses, and they're starting to tell you, hey, I have a hard time delegating, what's your advice to them?
Yes. So it's advice I don't follow myself, but where we generally start is essentially creating a master document and it can be wherever they want it to be. I try to stay technology agnostic at the beginning because I feel like a lot of founders get stuck in like technology will fix everything
Uh-huh.
or I'm stuck
Uh-huh.
in the process my tech has.
Yep.
And what I like to start with is what are the processes you already have? Whether
Okay.
they're documented or not, but what are they, right? And then let's start to document them. What does that look like? So what are you doing on a daily basis? What does your day look like? Do you get up, you check your emails? Do you go to LinkedIn and create posts? Do you, have a social media presence? And start to really dig into what does the day in a life look like?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think for me, and I don't know if this is true for you, but for me, the easiest things to pass off were the stuff I hated.
Yeah.
Bookkeeping. That was so easy to pass off. I thought, here
Mm-hmm.
you go, have at it. The harder stuff to pass off is the stuff you actually like, you just don't
Mm-hmm.
have time to do anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where you really have to sit down with the founder and kind of say, does this truly have to be you, or do you just enjoy doing it?
Yeah.
And could someone else be doing this and freeing up your time for, something different that's either more revenue generating or something that could be building the business in the long run? And that's where I find people have the most trouble. We're very good at delegating the stuff we don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Very hard. It's very hard for us to delegate the stuff that we enjoy, but we don't have the time for. Either it's time
Yeah.
consuming or it's not something that's actually building the business, it's running the business. And those are two separate things.
Yes.
And I find that that's sometimes where founders have a difficult time. It's spending time on their own business versus spending time on client businesses. And,
Yeah.
trying to figure out what is that really good balance where you feel like, yes, I'm growing my business enough and I'm giving my clients as much as I can. Because I
Uh-huh.
don't know about you, but I'm a very difficult boss.
Yeah, I know. Me too. Well, and so there's a phrase I love called, are you working on your business or in your business? And I find that I'm working in my business much more than I'm working
Yeah.
on my business. And as the CEO of my company, if I want to continue to scale, I've got to step away from the operation. I've got to step away from the day-to-day being on site, making sure everything is going well. That's why I have managers. That's why I have a team. And
Mm-hmm.
I've got to trust my team. But the problem that I have is that I love that part of it. I
Yeah.
actually really, really enjoy it. But then I go on site and I spend the whole day somewhere at an event that we're managing or staffing. And then I get home, I'm like, crap, I still got to do invoices.
All
Crap,
the other stuff.
I still
Yeah.
got to do this. And it's like they're all the things that I was supposed to be doing to work on my business. I wasn't doing because I was too busy working in my business, even though I love what I was doing. So yes, I get caught in that trap for sure.
It's easier to break, and that's where I find having a thought partner and so that's where it's really easy for me to help other people with that
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Because that outside perspective is so
Uh-huh.
much better, right? It's easier to listen to someone and to kind of toss back and forth and have that aha moment than it is to do that on your own, which is
Yes.
also why it's so important as a solopreneur or as someone who's leading a business to have a network of people who are having similar challenges, people that you can go to and say, hey, I have this problem. Is this normal? Is there some other way I should approach this? Because when you're kind of trying to ideate by yourself, you're not really going to come up with any new and innovative ideas. You can try Gemini or ChatGPT,
Yep.
insert your AI, but
Right.
they're only going to bounce back to you what they know. Whereas when
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of iterating with someone else, you can come up with better ideas.
Yeah, 100%. So when we're talking about all of this, like working on your business, not in your business and all that, how do you help people achieve work-life balance? What does that look like?
So first of all, I believe that work-life balance doesn't exist.
Good. Yeah, me neither.
Um, I think life is a series of choices that you have to
Uh-huh.
make. And in some instances, you might be putting more time into your business. And if that's a discussion you've had with your family and
Yeah.
everybody understands it and everyone knows where you're coming from and you feel good about the outcomes you're going for. And to me, that's the
Mm-hmm.
most important thing.
Yeah.
Um, I did an executive MBA program, which meant working full time and going to school full time. So
Mm-hmm.
during that time, was I cleaning the house as often? Was I cooking as often? No, I was not. Right.
Right.
And was I attending all the family events? No, I couldn't because I was at school every weekend for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we make choices and we have to feel firm in our own belief that those are the right choices for us in the moment that we're making them. And then we can shift our focus during the next season of life, right? So once I graduated, I went on, the offensive of I'm going to every family event,
Right.
I'm going to do all the things. And
Yes.
so, we go through those phases and we have to feel good for ourselves about those phases. So not what society is telling us, not what, the other moms at pickup are telling us, not what all the other people at work are telling us. We have to feel good about that for ourselves. And you have to have a tribe that supports
Mm-hmm.
you in that because it's never going to be all at once. It's just not.
No. Well, and I find that as women, we hold ourselves to an impossible standard because there is, like there's so many different, like if you're let's just say the husbands who work and they, the only thing that is expected of them is that they work and that occasionally they show up and manage, life with the family. So that's their expectation. And as long as they're hitting that mark, they're good. But for women, it's totally different. Like we have the expectation of being the caretaker of the home, of our parents, of our children, of our spouse, of our community, of our church, of our schools, of our, like there's so many other things. And then we're also being compared to, if you're a working mom, you're comparing yourself to, well, I'm not as involved in my child's school as that stay-at-home mom, and I'm not as, involved with my church as, these retired women, and
Uh-huh.
like we're holding ourselves to a standard and we're comparing ourselves to people who, the way, like you said, life is a series of choices. They've made different choices, but we feel like that's still the bar is
Yep.
still way up here, and we have a hard time reconciling, hey, it's okay if this is my path and this is my choice right now.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to being your own friend.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've realized this, but I definitely have done a lot of work on this where I'm so nice to my friends and I'm so
Mm.
supportive and I'm always like, yeah. And then to myself, I'm terrible. I'm
Yeah.
like, you didn't do this well. You did a terrible job. Why
Yes.
didn't, and it's so be your own friend, right?
Mm.
Be, when you feel like you dropped the ball or you feel like build yourself up like you
Yeah.
would your friend, not, kind of that inner monologue that we tend to have, which is sort of you weren't good enough and you could have done better. And here's the
Yeah.
list of things you could have done to improve. You would
Hmm.
never tell your friend that.
No,
Never
I
in a
would
million
never tell
years.
my friend they're a complete loser. Like, you missed a deadline, you loser. But you better believe I'm going to tell myself that if I miss a
Exactly.
deadline. That's an arbitrary deadline that I made up for myself anyway. But I gave it to myself, and I am going to berate myself over and over and over for missing a deadline that nobody else even knew that there was a deadline. It
It
was just
didn't
my
even
deadline.
exist to anyone else, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
so, we do this to ourselves. We,
Mhm.
we box ourselves into these corners where then we can't be successful.
Yes,
And so
yes,
I think work-life balance is one of those things that we just kind of have to all admit to each other that it
yeah,
just, it's not a thing.
yeah.
It's all about choices and feeling good about the choices you make.
Absolutely. So speaking of choices we make, you ran an Ironman, or you participated in an Ironman.
I did. I
Tell
did.
me about that. That's amazing. Tell me all about it.
So, talk about surrounding yourself with the right people. So,
Uh-huh.
I have a very good friend of mine who was helping me through a pretty challenging time in my personal life. And she said, you should run. I was like, I don't run. And she said, no, you can run. And I said, I just really I don't think running is for me. And
Right.
I did my first race. It was a half marathon and I loved it. The thrill,
Really?
the adrenaline.
Ah,
I hated training for it.
uh-huh.
You talked
Uh-huh.
to me while I was training for it, I'd have been like, no, I'm throwing up in gutters. I do not want to do this. No one's chasing me. But
Right.
after I crossed the finish line, it was like this addiction of accomplishment, right? And as a type A
Wow.
personality, you always need that sort of accomplishment, right? And so she got me into running, and then she convinced me. She said, I'm training for this race. It's called an Ironman. I was like, what is that? And she's like, well, you swim. And I was like, I can't swim. She goes, then you bike. And I said, well, that's a little iffy. And she goes, then you run. And I'm like, oh, the one thing I can do. Okay.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so I signed up for a half Ironman initially, without even ever having swam.
Wow.
And had to take swimming lessons as an adult, which is a lot of fun. And I live in Brooklyn, New York now. At the time I was living in Manhattan, had to find a pool, had to figure out how I was going to learn how to swim as a, 30 something. And what a humbling experience, because you're learning to
Really?
swim in a pool with children who are, 4 and they can swim across and you're like drowning on a buoy. And then it's really about the camaraderie. It's about the people you
Yeah.
meet during the training. You train. So for the full Ironman, I trained for a full year.
Wow.
I was slow, but I did it. And it's really more about the mental training and the mental fitness and getting up every day when you don't feel like training and going out and doing it and showing up.
Yeah.
And I feel like the discipline that it teaches you and just the concept of you're not doing it because you're fearless. You are afraid. Like I was like, am I going to drown? I tried to,
Yeah.
strategically pick a race that was sort of, they called it a downhill swim because it was with the current.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But you learn how to push yourself to your limits. And then when you hit that limit, how to push yourself a little bit farther, because guess what? You still got to get to the finish line, even if you don't feel like doing it anymore. So my husband says I'm retired now because it does take a lot of time and energy, and it is very expensive.
Yeah.
But it is one of those accomplishments that, when you're going through something tough, you kind of look back and you're like, well, wait a minute, I did that.
Yeah.
Surely I can figure out how to make this week work with the pack schedule and all the things that are happening.
Well, good for you. What an amazing accomplishment that is.
Thank you. Luckily, my parents were there to cheer the whole time.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they really should have trained, because I think they ended up walking like 10 miles. They were not between all the different viewing points. My dad said he really should have had training himself.
That's hysterical. I love it. So do you think that might have been a good setup for you when you are starting your business? Because you're like, I can do hard things, right?
I do think so. I think, I've always been one to sort of challenge myself and always come up with the next goal, right? So shortly after the Ironman, then I did the MBA program. And so there's always something out there, right? I think if you're setting goals and striving for something, it's inspiring to others and inspiring to yourself, right? You're never complacent. So I think also the structure of the Ironman, I was so calendared. I was so, on top of things. Right. And I think that structure helps you to then accomplish other things in your life, because you start to learn, okay, it's on the calendar, it doesn't happen. Right.
Yeah.
And my husband knows that too. It's like, if it's not on the calendar, it's not happening. I'm not, and some Saturdays are very calendared, where it's like every 15 minutes, here's where we're going. This is what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then other days it's like, okay, here's my 3-hour self-care block, and we're just gonna, chill and relax. And so I think it helps you to understand what that looks like, because even during Ironman training, there are rest days.
Yeah. So do you have to have a trainer? Like, do you have to have some kind of mentor?
So I had a coach.
Yeah.
And I do think the coach is, I think in all aspects of our life, we tend to think, and I mentioned this earlier, we'll just go it alone. And I think that's never a bright idea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it always has to be someone you pay. I do think it can be, a community that you have, but in this case, I had a coach who was the one to kind of tell me, hey, you've been running a little too hard lately. Like, take a step back, and she would write in we use this tool called Training Peaks. She would write in there, do not overdo this, Katrina.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you need someone who's going to push you, but also someone who's going to kind of pull you back and say, overdoing it, you're not going to make it. Because one of the biggest things about an Ironman is actually making it to the start line healthy. There are so many people who overtrain and get burnt out or get hurt, or, and so bringing on a coach in that aspect. And like I said, also some swimming, right? So figuring out what you're good at and what you're not good at, and then being able to bring in people to help you with the things where you feel like you need to improve. And it is really very much like a business, right?
I was about to say, a very good analogy for a business, because it's the same thing. Yeah.
It's the same thing. Like I said, from the beginning, I said, I'm getting a CPA.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with any of it. Don't want to look at it, and I found one who's amazing. I love her. She's fantastic. And that's another place where you just put your money where your mouth is. It took me forever to find a female CPA. You wouldn't think it would be so hard, but I was like, I got to find one.
Wow.
And so it really is a good metaphor for sort of the act of building a business and even running it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what would you have done differently if you could change anything? What would you go back and do differently?
Oh, what a question. In general, or just about the business?
About the business. About the business, yeah.
I probably would have done it sooner.
Really?
Yeah, I think I would have done it sooner. I think I didn't have that confidence and faith to sort of go out and jump on my own, but I think I probably should have.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think it's turned out in many ways better than I imagined. I think there's definitely always something that you want to scale and grow, or something new you want to do, but I wish I had started it sooner.
Yeah. Would you say that to other people? What is generally your advice when somebody says, I think I want to leave my 9-to-5 and I think I want to start a business? What would you say? Have this ready, or be ready for this?
I had this conversation with someone this morning, and she said, well, I'm just going to keep running it on the side and keep my 9-to-5. I said, why? Why? What are you waiting for? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I like to tell people is you need to build what your exit plan is.
Okay.
And I'm not saying ignore the things. I'm saying put the things on the exit plan, figuring
Yeah.
out health insurance, right? How much money do you need in the bank that you're going to start to debit? Because understanding that even if the business brings in money, you may not be bringing in money until you get with your CPA and figure out how you're drawing money out of the business and what that looks like. So for me, that period was about 4 months where the business had money, but I had no money.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so understanding what that looks like, what is that exit plan? How much money do I need in the bank? You know, how am I figuring out my health insurance? What are the other perks that my job has that I really want? Because I think oftentimes what ends up, we get addicted to that paycheck.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I will say that first pay cycle that came around and I was like, oh, no money's going in, huh?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Is that how that's going to feel? Because I mean, my whole adult life, right? Every 2
Yeah.
weeks, and there comes, and so we become slaves to that paycheck, and it's hard to walk away from. But you have to make a plan, and you have to feel resolute in that plan and understand what it looks like. And you can't do it alone. You have to do it with your family. So whoever your partner, whoever's financially responsible, whoever you're financially responsible to, to really sit down and say, okay, if I'm going to do this, what does this look like? And we cut out expenses. We cut down on a lot of things to make sure that, we had longer runway, so that I had time to be successful.
Right.
Because I think sometimes people put too much pressure to be successful right off the bat. And it takes time to gain traction. It takes time to start to develop your client base. It takes time to groom that network and make sure that you're talking to the right people. And so giving yourself that time, whether that means doing it alongside the 9 to 5 for a few months, but really giving yourself that eject button of, okay, once I hit this point, I'm going.
Yeah. 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 Well, and I think people quit way too soon. They're like, okay, I'm freaking out. This is painful. I've got to hurry up and bail. Right. And so they bail out too soon. And, it's hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Starting a business is hard. You're going to have those moments where you're like, I don't know if I can continue doing this, but it's the grit to get through those tough times that, it's character building. I always say when somebody's going through something hard, don't worry, it's character building. You will get through it.
Yeah, it is character building. It's true. I think, that's why I like to put it in numbers terms too, because it shouldn't be a feeling. It shouldn't be I feel like I'm done. It should really be like the numbers, everything is pointing to I'm done and that I can successfully pull this off. Because if you go by how you feel in the moment, you might feel differently in a week, right? A project could shift, something could happen, your boss could quit. Like, you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I like to make it a little bit more, numbers based and a little bit firmer in terms of like why and what is the actual KPI you're looking for.
Oh yeah. 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 That's a great way to put it, actually, because you're right. I mean, emotionally, you could be, going through, roller coaster of like, yes, this is working. No, this is terrible.
Yeah.
This is the best decision ever. This is horrible. Right.
And to be fair, you do that on your own business too. So
yes.
There are some days where you're like, what have I done?
Yeah.
And then there are other days where you're like, this is fantastic. And you wish you could bottle that feeling for the days when you feel like everything is falling down around you.
Yeah. Well, and as many hard days as I have, and owning a business, as you know, there's a lot of hard days. There's a lot of days where you're like, what was I thinking when I did this? But, at the end of it, everybody's like, so would you do it again? I'm like, absolutely. Absolutely. Best thing I've ever done. Hard. It's very hard, but it's definitely the best thing I've ever done. So what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Oh, so I would tell my 18-year-old self not to care what everyone thinks.
Yeah, I think that's something good.
I spent a lot of time in my 20s building a life that based off societal expectations was supposed to make me really happy and didn't. And then I spent my early 30s unwinding that. And then I spent my 30s figuring out what I actually wanted. And then I launched my business in my early 40s. And, I do think you have to honor the journey you're on because it brought you to where you are. But I wish I had known earlier more about what made me truly happy versus what made everyone else truly happy. And that I felt stronger in my own conviction that what was going to make me happy was what I was going to do. And I do think Gen Z is really rocking that. But, I think that's definitely something I wish that I had felt better about. But I think whenever I have someone in my life turn 30, I'm always like, it's going to get so good now. Like it's just gonna get so good. I
Yeah.
promise you, people freak out about it. I'm like, no, it's gonna be amazing.
Yeah.
You're
So
gonna
much
love
better.
it.
Hmm.
And it's like, why couldn't I just have gotten rid of all those things in my 20s?
I know, I know. Well, like I tell my son, don't even think about getting married until you're 30. Don't even think about
I
it.
know. And I did it the first time in my 20s, late
Mm,
20s,
yep.
later than a lot of my friends. And then I had to be like, oh, sorry, this was really like
Not a
27-year-old
great.
me did not know what she
Right.
really wanted from life. And here we are. I
Yeah.
did much better the second time.
Yeah. Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I didn't know anything in my 20s, and if I could dial back some of those choices that, I made just out of pleasing other people or doing what I thought should be done, yeah, I would have saved myself a whole lot of grief, but,
But we learned,
we
right?
learned
And I
character
think
building.
that's it was character building for sure.
Uh-huh. That's okay. That's okay. So, as women, we give away our power a lot. So, can you tell me about a time that you've given away your power, whether that's, giving somebody else credit for your work or allowing
Mhm.
someone to treat you poorly when you deserve better? Can you tell me about a time that you gave your power away and then another time that you stepped into your power?
Yes, and I will give you the example in relation to the same person. So
Okay.
someone took my power.
Ah,
It was a boss. And I guess I gave it away in a sense, because I was feeling like I was advancing a greater good. And
mm,
so, I felt like I was standing up for the team. And in standing up for the team, I was really allowing myself to be walked all over.
oh, okay.
And I didn't truly recognize it until a moment where this person was really sort of disparaging, let's say, we'll
Mm-hmm.
put it that way. And I was really taken aback by it. And I realized in that moment that even though I thought this person respected me, and that was my thing, I don't have to be liked, I have to be respected. In that moment, I realized there was no respect.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And in that second, I actually realized it was on both sides. Like I had lost my respect as well for their
Yeah.
authority and just for their overall, thought process. And in that moment is when I took that power back and really kind of flipped the dynamic on its head and decided, well, I'm actually going to tell you that I'm quitting.
Wow.
I'm launching my own business and that's what this is going to look like. And this person said, well, you can't do that. And I said, well, I can. And this is going to be my last day. And, if you would want to continue further services, like this is what it would look like. And I realized I just needed to approach more things with this attitude of like, if it doesn't go well, who cares?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because in that moment, you're powerful because you don't care about the outcome. The outcome can go either way.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes we get so caught up in things having to go exactly perfectly or exactly how we imagine them that we give away our power without realizing it because we really want one particular outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And when you
Mm-hmm.
don't care about the outcome and you just feel, you just want that moment to go. And that moment, he could have said, I don't want to work with you anymore. And I would have been like, okay, fine. I already told you
Yeah.
that first.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. And
Right.
in the end, they did hire me and I did do work for them, and I think, but I didn't care one way or the other. Right. And I think that to me, that was the sense of power is that,
Yeah. Yeah.
regardless of the outcome, I'm going to turn out just fine. And I
Absolutely.
think we need to do a little more of that because as women, we tend to be people pleasers. We tend to want people to be happy around us. For me in particular, I think I always like things to be nice and copacetic and I don't want there to be any friction and no drama. And sometimes you kind of have to go in and be like, no, this is how it's going to be. It's my way or the highway. And, if the highway is the choice, okay.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I actually just had this conversation with somebody and I said, sometimes you just got to be okay with not being liked. And
Mhm.
that's what we struggle with sometimes is we want everybody to like us. Like just, let's be likable. And as women, we tend to prioritize that over respect. And so
Yep.
I love that you said I don't need to be liked, I need to be respected. And that's really important.
Yep.
So good for you. So this has been a really fun conversation, but I have one more question for you.
Okay.
So what do you wish more people knew?
What do I wish more people knew? Oh, I wish more people knew how fast life goes
Yeah. Hmm.
and how sometimes the things they spend so much time worrying about just don't actually matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I'm also terrible at that. So, but I think it's in a blink of an eye, right? You're in your 40s and you're like, wait, what's my impact and what am I doing? And how do I leave a legacy? And what does that look like? And I think having those conversations earlier and understanding that, that's something that's important to you and making sure that you can make career moves or life moves around what's important to you, I think is really powerful, because you build a life that you're happy with and proud of.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Katrina. This has been such a fun conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it too.
So how can people find you?
Yes, I am on the web at katrinapurcell.com, a beautiful website that my husband built for me.
Nice.
Shout out to him.
Good.
And then I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Where I do post a lot about just managing the chaos of startup life. And I have a podcast where we talk about that as well.
Awesome. Well, and you can also find Katrina Purcell on prettypowerfulpodcast.com.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure to have all your links up there. So thank you so much again. This has been a really, really fun conversation, and I hope our listeners have learned a bunch from it. So thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining our guests on the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And we hope you've gained new insight and learned from exceptional women. Remember to subscribe or check out this and all episodes on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Visit us next time, and until then, step into your own power.